Well, before coming to UHS, I was a program director at the Decision Education Foundation. It's an educational think tank based in Palo Alto. So most of the work that I was doing there was working with teachers and administrators around sort of decision-making theories and how people actually sort of make decisions in real life and how they can make better decisions.
I think so. You got a degree in decision making and risk management.
Well, yes, I got a certificate in decision and risk management recently. My undergraduate degree is in anthropology with a focus on religion.
Culture as well?
Yes, cultural anthropology with the social cultural anthropology with the focus on religion. And then I got a master's in fine arts and creative writing. And most recently was doing this work in decision making.
Okay, so I heard you recently taught at Urban.
I did. So about 3 years ago I was teaching at Urban. So I taught there for 2 years. I also taught at Castelia for a couple of years.
What do you think of university in comparison?
Well, they're very similar schools in a lot of ways, but also, different in some ways. University is a great school, and so is Urban. They're both, really terrific environments where, someone can get just a terrific education and be surrounded by a lot of people who care about learning and, people who want to be part of a community also. So I think that applies to both schools. So I've enjoyed both experiences.
Where do you think people are more free to be themselves, or do you...
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think it just depends on who you are and what you want to be, at a certain point. My hope is that people sort of feel comfortable to be whoever they are anywhere, so at any school, any town, any place. Well, yeah, I think UHS has a lot of diversity in some ways. I tend not to think of diversity in some of the narrow ways that we might think about in terms of like race, class, things like that. So there may be areas where the school can really, I think, improve its diversity or its sort of, the way that the school sort of functions or looks, that sort of thing. But again, everyone has a wealth of experiences and sort of, and we all sort of tap into a lot of different identities. So I think that that's important too. And then those things sort of shift over time. So, sometimes one identity might be important to someone and then that, shifts as they sort of age. So I guess what I'm saying is that UHS has a lot of work to do, but it's also still a very diverse place in some ways, and I think that's pretty apparent. And I think recognizing, just the sort of differences that are sort of, that exist in all of us is really important. Not to sort of dilute the work that I'm doing as a diversity educator, that really is very much about sort of making the school a place where everyone feels comfortable and everyone feels like they have a place and a voice. I think that's very real work. So I guess I'm making two comments at once. One is that diversity is a really broad thing, and I think it changes and shifts for people over time. And there's a sort of risk of becoming too attached to sort of superficial sort of signs of diversity. But also, given that those superficial signs really do matter, because they aren't just superficial; they're real. Race is a real thing. Even though it's a construction, people live with race as a reality. Even though gender may feel constructed, it's reality for people, things like that. Well, a lot of my work this year will be sort of figuring out what's working and what's not working. So, I'm relatively new here, so I'm still getting a sense of what's happening at the school and sort of making my own assessments. But again, I think the school has done some things really well, and I think there are areas for improvement, as there would be in any school. I hope that we can have a discussion series or sort of faculty sort of regular meeting time where we can read essays, articles about diversity, culture, inclusion, and talk about them in a more informal setting. We're also going to obviously do some required programming that's going to sort of include the adults on campus. In my role as diversity educator, it's mostly a position that's focused on the adults. But I will be working with students as well. So there's some initiatives that we've been talking about that are targeted at students. So I certainly have a lot of ideas, and the community will be hearing about them very soon. Yes, I'm teaching English 1. I'm also teaching English 2. I taught English and philosophy classes for about 12 years at independent schools. I taught on the East Coast for a little while, and then I taught here in California for a little while. So I was an English teacher, lit teacher for a really long time, and taught some philosophy classes.
So would you say you're more of a lenient or a fun or a strict teacher? What would you say?
I think you have to ask my students about that. I think I'm a pretty serious person in general. I like to have a lot of fun, but I'm a fairly serious person, and in class tend to be a fairly serious teacher. I think they're great students, really sort of friendly, warm, really engaged. All of the students I've met here have been very open and warm, and and also just sort of interested in talking about, meaningful things.
Are you doing well with Haroon?
Yes.
Up and Chup?
We're teaching Haroon right now. I'm also teaching Oedipus right now. So these are books that I've taught before and that I really like. So.
Are there any hobbies or sports or interests you have that you'd like to share?
Sure. I mean, I paint a lot. So I do sort of large-scale paintings. I do a lot of sort of text on canvas. So because I've been a teacher and writer for many years, I've sort of just developed a sort of practice of doing large paintings that have sonnets on them.
Mm-hmm.
So really, for me, that's been really interesting to sort of play around with text canvas, but also in a very, very large way. So I do that quite a bit. I also run a lot.
Okay.
My dog and I run usually most mornings. We try to go for a run if I have time. So it's something I enjoy.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.